My name is Lacey Wilson, and at 35 years old, I had built a tech empire that few people in my life knew about. I was driving back to my childhood home for Christmas dinner, the first in 7 years, with knots in my stomach. My father, Harold, had always favored my brothers Vincent and Gregory, but nothing prepared me for what he announced at dinner. When he said I would be cut from the inheritance, I simply nodded and kept eating. Little did anyone know what was about to happen. If you are watching this right now, please hit the like button, subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you are watching from as I take you through a night that changed my family forever. I grew up in Oakage, a small town in Ohio where everyone knew everyone. Our family home was a large colonial-style house on Maple Street, the kind that makes neighbors assume you have money. And to an extent we did. My father, Harold, had built a successful manufacturing business from the ground up, something he never let anyone forget. From my earliest memories, it was clear who mattered most in our household. My brothers, Vincent and Gregory, were groomed to take over the family business from the moment they could walk. Vincent, 3 years older than me, was the analytical one with a head for numbers. Gregory, 2 years younger, had the charisma and the people skills. And me, I was the middle child who never quite fit into my father's vision of success. Business is a man's world, Lacey. My father would say whenever I showed interest in the company. You should focus on finding a good husband who can provide for you. This was in the early 2000s, not the 1950s. But my father remained frozen in time when it came to gender roles. My mother, Diane, would give me sympathetic looks but never contradicted him. She came from a generation of women who stood behind their husbands, not beside them. School became my refuge. I excelled academically, particularly in mathematics and computer science. While my brothers were attending football games and business dinners with my father, I was staying late in the computer lab with Mrs. Bennett, my high school teacher who first introduced me to coding. "You have a gift, Lacey," Mrs. Bennett told me during my senior year. "The world is changing. Technology is the future, and you could be part of building it." When college application season arrived, I set my sights on Stanford. Their computer science program was one of the best in the country, and Silicon Valley was where innovation happened. I worked tirelessly on my application, and when the acceptance letter arrived, I was ecstatic. My father was not. "Stanford? In California? That is ridiculous. The family business is here." He scoffed when I showed him the letter. "Besides, do you know how expensive that school is?" I did know. I had research scholarships and financial aid options, but there was still a significant gap. When I applied for a critical scholarship and was rejected, I went to my father for help. We were in his home office, a room dominated by dark wood and leather that smelled of cigars. Behind his large desk, he looked like a judge about to pass sentence. "Your brothers need to focus on business degrees to take over the company," he explained. "That is where the family money needs to go. Your computer thing is just a hobby." "It is not a hobby, Dad. It is what I want to do with my life," I insisted. "Well, you will have to figure out how to pay for it yourself," he replied, turning back to his papers. The conversation was over. So I did exactly that. I deferred my admission for a year and worked 3 jobs simultaneously: waitressing in the morning, retail in the afternoon, and bookkeeping for local businesses at night. I saved every penny, took out loans, and finally made it to Stanford the following fall. Those college years were brutal. While other students enjoyed the full college experience, I was constantly working side jobs to make ends meet. I barely slept 4 hours a night during finals week. But I graduated with honors and, more importantly, with the skills and connections to enter the tech industry. My first job was at a small startup in San Francisco. The pay was modest, but the experience was invaluable. I worked directly with the founders, absorbing everything I could about building a company from scratch. When that startup was acquired 2 years later, I had enough savings and knowledge to start thinking about my own venture. Meanwhile, back in Oakage, Vincent and Gregory had joined the family business as executives. Every phone call with my mother included updates about their achievements and my father's pride in them. I was happy for my brothers, truly, but the contrast in how our career paths were valued was stark. The final breaking point came during a brief visit home 10 years ago. I had just launched my first company, a healthcare technology platform that used artificial intelligence to improve patient care. We were pre-revenue, running on venture capital, and I was working around the clock to make it succeed. During a family dinner, similar to the one I was now driving toward, my father had asked about my little computer project in a dismissive tone. Actually, we just closed our Series A funding round, I said, trying to explain the significance. Series A? What does that even mean? My father interrupted. Real businesses make products and profits, not fancy presentations for investors. Vincent chuckled. Dad has a point, Lacey. When are you going to get a real job? This is a real job, I countered. The technology we are building could revolutionize healthcare. Well, when you are done playing entrepreneur in California and ready to come back to reality, there might be a position in accounting at the family business, my father offered, as if doing me a great favor. I left the next morning without saying goodbye. For the next several years, my contact with the family was limited to occasional phone calls with my mother and Christmas cards. They knew I was still in California, still working in tech, but little else. I never shared my growing success, and they never really asked for details. Now, as I pulled up to the familiar house in my rented Toyota, I took a deep breath. My own car, a custom Tesla, was safely parked in my garage in San Francisco. No need to arrive in a vehicle that cost more than most houses in this neighborhood. I had deliberately downplayed everything about my appearance. Designer clothes were swapped for a simple sweater and jeans. The only luxury I could not bear to remove was my watch, a gift to myself when we hit our first 1 million users. But even that could be hidden under my sleeve. This Christmas dinner was my attempt at reconciliation, at showing my family who I had become despite their lack of support. Little did I know just how dramatic that revelation would be. The house looked exactly as it always did during the holidays. Multicolored lights outlined the roof and windows. A wreath hung on the front door, and through the windows I could see the glow of the Christmas tree. For a moment I felt like a teenager again, coming home from school to the smell of my mother's cooking. I hesitated before ringing the doorbell. 7 years is a long time to be essentially estranged from your family. Would they see the changes in me? Would I fit in any better now than I did then? My mother answered the door, her face lighting up when she saw me. Lacey, you made it. She pulled me into a tight hug, the familiar scent of her perfume bringing back a flood of memories. Come in. Come in. Everyone is already here. Everyone indeed. As I stepped into the living room, a sea of familiar faces turned toward me. My brothers Vincent and Gregory were standing by the fireplace, drinks in hand. Vincent's wife, Sophia, was arranging presents under the tree while their children, Tyler and Emma, now 14 and 12, were engrossed in their phones. Gregory's wife, Heather, was in deep conversation with Aunt Martha, my father's sister, while their 16-year-old son, Jackson, sat in the corner, completely absorbed in his smartphone. Uncle Frank, Aunt Martha's husband, was watching a football game with Uncle James and Aunt Patricia, my mother's brother and his wife. And there, in his usual armchair like a king on his throne, sat my father. He looked older than I remembered, his hair now completely gray, but his posture was still commanding, his gaze still penetrating as he assessed me. Lacey, he said, nodding in acknowledgement. Not a hug, not even a rise from his chair. Just my name spoken like a statement of fact. Hi, Dad, I replied, matching his tone. Merry Christmas. Vincent approached first, giving me an awkward side hug. Welcome home, sis. California treating you well. It is, I said simply. Still doing that app thing? Gregory joined in, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Something like that, I answered vaguely. Well, the family business is booming, Vincent continued. We just expanded to 3 new states last quarter. Dad put me in charge of operations across the Midwest, and I am handling all major client relationships now, Gregory added. Revenue is up 37% since last year. The pattern was so familiar it was almost comical. My brothers establishing their success, seeking approval, marking their territory. I simply smiled and offered congratulations. And what about you, Lacey? My father finally spoke up. Did that startup of yours ever get off the ground? Before I could answer, my mother intervened. Dinner is almost ready. Lacey, would you help me in the kitchen? I gratefully followed her, escaping the interrogation. The kitchen was warm and fragrant with the smell of roast turkey, stuffing, and freshly baked pies. My mother had always been an exceptional cook, and Christmas dinner was her masterpiece. "I am so glad you came," she said as she handed me a stack of plates to carry. "Your father would never admit it, but he has missed you." I doubted that very much, but I nodded anyway. "How have you been, Mom?" "Really?" She paused, considering the question. "Oh, busy with the usual. The boys bring the grandchildren over often. Vincent and Gregory are at the house almost daily for business meetings with your father." She lowered her voice. "I wish you called more often." Guilt tugged at me. I know I should have. "Are you happy out there in California? Do you have someone special?" The concern in her voice was genuine, and I felt a pang of regret for keeping her at such a distance. "I am happy, Mom. My work keeps me very busy, but I love what I do. No serious relationship right now, but that is okay." She squeezed my arm. "As long as you are happy, that is what matters." If only my father shared that sentiment. Dinner was served in the formal dining room, a space reserved for holidays and special occasions. The table was set with the good china, crystal glasses, and silver that had been in the family for generations. I took my assigned seat between Aunt Martha and Emma, directly across from my father at the head of the table. The meal began with my father's traditional Christmas prayer, thanking God for family, prosperity, and another successful year of business. I noticed he made no mention of my return. Conversation flowed around me, carefully navigating around any potentially controversial topics. Whether sports, the children's school activities, or community gossip. Anything but politics or personal matters that might disrupt the carefully maintained facade of family harmony. I focused on making conversation with my niece and nephew. Emma was now in middle school and had developed an interest in science. Tyler was in high school playing basketball and thinking about colleges. Jackson, Gregory's son, barely looked up from his phone, even when spoken to directly. "What are you so obsessed with over there?" Gregory finally asked him. "Research," Jackson mumbled, not elaborating. "Put it away during dinner, Heather," his mother instructed. Jackson reluctantly complied, though I caught him sneaking glances at the device every few minutes. "So, Lacey," Aunt Martha beside me began, "Diane tells me you have your own business now. What exactly do you do?" All eyes turned to me, and I felt the familiar pressure to minimize my achievements to avoid outshining my brothers or upsetting my father. "I founded a healthcare technology company," I explained, keeping it simple. "We build software that helps hospitals and doctors provide better care for patients." "That sounds fascinating," Aunt Martha replied genuinely. "Is it doing well?" I could feel my father's gaze intensify. "We are making progress," I said diplomatically. Vincent chuckled. "Tech startups burn through investor money for years before they ever turn a profit, if they do at all. Meanwhile, manufacturing continues to be the backbone of the American economy. The family business just had its best quarter ever," my father added proudly. "Your brothers have really taken it to the next level." And there it was, the redirection to the family business, to my brother's achievements, the clear message about what kind of success was valued in this house. I helped my mother and Sophia clear the plates after the main course, grateful for the momentary escape from the table. In the kitchen, Sophia surprised me with a genuine question. "What is it really like running your own company?" she asked quietly. "Vincent never tells me much about the business side of things." I hesitated, then decided to be honest. "It is the hardest thing I have ever done. Constant pressure, impossible decisions, sleepless nights. But when you are building something you believe in, something that could actually help people, it is worth it." She nodded thoughtfully. "That sounds more fulfilling than just carrying on something someone else built." Before I could respond, we were interrupted by my mother announcing it was time for dessert. As we returned to the dining room with pies and coffee, I noticed my father tapping his glass with a spoon, the traditional signal that he had something important to say. Little did I know this announcement would change everything. The room fell silent as my father stood at the head of the table, commanding attention as he always had. He was wearing his favorite navy blue sweater, the one he reserved for special occasions, and his expression was serious. "Before we enjoy Diane's wonderful desserts, I have an important announcement to make," he began, his voice carrying the authoritative tone I remembered from childhood. "As you all know, Wilson Manufacturing has been growing steadily over the past few years, thanks largely to the exceptional work of Vincent and Gregory." My brothers straightened in their chairs, basking in the praise. Vincent's wife, Sophia, beamed proudly, while Gregory's wife, Heather, nodded in agreement. We have recently acquired our biggest competitor in the Midwest, expanding our operations significantly, my father continued. This means we are now the largest manufacturer of industrial equipment in 5 states with plans to expand further in the coming year. Murmurs of approval circulated around the table. Uncle Frank raised his glass in a silent toast to my father, who acknowledged it with a nod before continuing. With this growth comes the need for clear succession planning. I am not getting any younger, he said with a small laugh that was echoed politely around the table. So, after careful consideration and discussions with our family attorney, I have made some decisions about the future of the company and our family assets. I took a sip of water, already anticipating what was coming. This was not the first time I had heard about succession planning, though it was the first time in years that I was present for such a discussion. Vincent will take over as CEO when I retire next year, my father announced. His financial acumen and operational expertise make him the natural choice to lead the company forward. Vincent nodded solemnly, accepting this expected coronation with practiced humility. Gregory will serve as president, overseeing all client relationships and new business development, areas where he has already proven himself exceptional. Gregory smiled and raised his glass to our father in appreciation. Together, they will guide Wilson Manufacturing into the next generation, preserving and building upon the legacy I have created. The table erupted in congratulations for my brothers. Aunt Martha patted Vincent's hand while Uncle James clapped Gregory on the back. My mother smiled proudly, though I noticed her glance in my direction with a hint of concern. My father cleared his throat, and the room quieted again. His gaze turned directly to me for the first time that evening. As for the matter of inheritance, he continued, his tone shifting slightly, I have decided to revise my will to reflect the contributions made to the family business. Here it comes, I thought, maintaining a neutral expression. Vincent and Gregory will inherit equal shares of the company and the majority of our family assets, he stated firmly. Then, looking directly at me, he delivered the blow he had clearly been preparing. Lacey, you will not be receiving an inheritance. Though I had anticipated this, hearing it stated so bluntly in front of the entire family sent a jolt through me. The room went completely silent. I could feel everyone's eyes darting between my father and me, waiting for a reaction. You have chosen your path away from this family and business, my father continued, his tone matter-of-fact rather than apologetic. Vincent and Gregory have dedicated their lives to building what I started. They deserve the inheritance. I maintained my composure, meeting his gaze steadily. 7 years ago, this announcement might have devastated me, might have provoked tears or anger. But I was no longer that person seeking validation from a man who had never truly seen me. I understand, I said calmly, picking up my fork and taking a bite of apple pie. The flavors barely registered as I focused on maintaining my dignity. The tension around the table was palpable. My mother's face had gone pale, her hands gripping her napkin tightly. Gregory looked vaguely uncomfortable, shifting in his seat and avoiding eye contact with me. Vincent, on the other hand, wore a barely concealed expression of satisfaction. Aunt Martha broke the silence first. Harold, is that really necessary to announce at Christmas dinner? Her disapproving tone suggested she found the timing, if not the decision itself, inappropriate. Family business should be discussed with family present, my father replied firmly, sitting back down. Now let us enjoy dessert. Conversation slowly resumed around the table, though notably more subdued than before. I focused on my pie, aware of the occasional glances of pity or curiosity directed my way. As I sat there, memories flooded back. The time I had asked for help with college tuition and was refused. The dismissal of my career choices, the constant comparisons to my brothers, the subtle and not so subtle messages that as a daughter I was somehow less valuable, less worthy of investment. Yet beneath the familiar hurt was a strange sense of peace. I no longer needed my father's approval or financial support. I had built something on my own terms, something he could never take credit for or control. Are you okay? Emma whispered beside me, her 12-year-old face concerned. I smiled genuinely at my niece. I am perfectly fine, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups have complicated relationships. She nodded with,